My son-in-law broke decorum to insult me, but my lawyer had proof. A bad weld looks fine from the outside. It's smooth. It holds when you tap it. It passes if nobody looks too close. It's only under real pressure that you find out it was never fused right to begin with. I spent 20 years learning the difference between a weld that holds and one that only looks like it does. It took my own son-in-law to teach me that people can fail the same test. Before I get into it, drop where you're tuning in from today, and what is the weather condition today in your area. I always like to know. My name's Grant Whitfield. I'm 46 years old, and I run a metal fabrication shop off Trent Avenue in Spokane, Washington. Custom railings, staircases, the occasional restaurant countertop, whatever pays the guys and keeps the lights on. I built that shop from a 2-bay garage into a real business over 24 years, and if you'd told 22-year-old me, welding fence posts for cash, that I'd end up with 6 employees and a waiting list, I'd have laughed at you. 8 years ago I married Renata. She came with a daughter, Ava, who was 19 at the time. Sharp, funny, a little guarded with me at first, the way kids are when a new man shows up in their mother's life. It took a couple years, but Ava and I found our footing. She started calling me Dad around the time she turned 22. The same month she graduated with a design degree from Eastern Washington. I never had kids of my own. She's mine in every way that matters. 3 years ago she married Tyler Cross. Tyler was 26 then, a mortgage loan officer at a regional bank downtown, good with a spreadsheet, better with people. The kind of guy who remembers your kid's name and asks about your knee surgery 6 months later. I liked him. I want to say that plainly, because it matters for what comes next. I liked him. There's a night I think about a lot now. It was maybe 4 months after the wedding, and I had a rush order, a spiral staircase for a lake house out past Coeur d'Alene. Client breathing down my neck because his contractor was 3 weeks behind and blaming everyone but himself. I was still at the shop past 10 on a Tuesday, alone, trying to get the stringers cut before a Thursday delivery. Tyler showed up around 10:30 with 2 coffees and a bag of those cinnamon twists from the gas station on Sprague. He hadn't been asked. Ava hadn't sent him. He just said he'd been driving home from a late closing, saw my truck still in the lot, and figured I could use the company. He stayed until 1 in the morning, holding sheet metal steady while I cut. Not saying much, just being useful. When we finally locked up, he told me, "Ava talks about how hard you worked to build this place. I get it now. I get why it matters to her. I remember thinking I'd lucked out with this kid. So you understand, this isn't a story about a villain who was always a villain. This is a story about somebody who was decent to me once, for real, and then did something that made me doubt every version of him I thought I knew." Here's the part that matters. Back when Ava graduated, I started putting money aside. Not for a wedding, not for a house, but for her. I called it the legacy fund in my head. Never out loud. Never even told Renata the full number for a long time because I didn't want it to feel like a big deal. I wanted Ava to be able to open her own design studio someday without drowning in a business loan the way I nearly did in my 20s. By this spring it had grown to just over $42,000, sitting in an account at Spokane Teachers Credit Union with my name and Ava's name both on it, since she'd need to access it eventually. Tyler was good with numbers, and somewhere along the way he started helping manage things for Ava. Bill pay, the joint accounts. And eventually, because I trusted him and honestly didn't think much about it, he had online access to the legacy fund too, to help Ava track it. I didn't think that was reckless at the time. I think it was reckless now. I noticed something was different at a family dinner in April. We were at Ava and Tyler's place, a rented duplex off Francis Avenue, and Tyler was in an unusually good mood, refilling glasses before they were empty, telling a long story about closing a jumbo loan that week, laughing louder than the joke deserved. At one point Renata asked how work was going, and Tyler got this look on his face, pleased with himself in a way I couldn't quite place, the look of somebody who thinks he's a few weeks from being proven right about something, and said, low, mostly to Ava but loud enough that I caught it, "By spring this is going to double. I told you I know what I'm doing. Nobody needs to worry about a thing." He reached over and squeezed her hand when he said it, like he was letting her in on a secret he was already savoring the ending of. Ava laughed it off like it was some private joke about a vacation fund. I didn't think anything of it. I wish I had, because that was Tyler standing at the top of something he didn't know was about to give out under him. 3 weeks later my credit union called me directly. Not Ava, me, since I was still the fund's primary holder. A woman named Bethany from the fraud department said they'd flagged a pattern of recurring transfers out of the legacy fund into an external trading platform I didn't recognize. 6 transfers over 4 months, totaling just under $31,000. She asked if I'd authorized them. I hadn't. I told her to hold off freezing anything yet, and I hung up and sat in my truck in the shop parking lot for a long time before I did anything else. I didn't confront anybody that day. That's not how I work. When a weld looks wrong, you don't just grind it out and hope. You check the whole joint. You find out exactly how deep the problem goes before you decide how to fix it. I sat with that phone call longer than I want to admit. I kept thinking about all the ordinary places I'd stood next to Tyler over 3 years, without ever once feeling a seam give. Thanksgiving, that night in the shop with the coffee and the cinnamon twists, him teaching my nephew to cast a fishing line at the lake house he'd helped finish. None of it had made a sound. That's the part that got to me most, driving home that afternoon. A joint can fail with no warning at all if it was never really fused, just pressed together and painted over to look finished. So I called my lawyer, a woman named Diane Okafor, who'd handled my business contracts for a decade, and I asked her, quietly, to help me understand what I was looking at. Over the next 5 weeks, she and I pulled 6 months of statements. The picture that came together wasn't complicated once you laid it out. Tyler had opened a margin trading account under his own name back in January. Lost $11,000 in the first 6 weeks chasing some crypto rally, and instead of telling Ava, he'd started pulling from the legacy fund in increments small enough, he must have figured, not to draw attention, 2,800 here, 4,000 there, trying to trade his way back to even before anyone noticed the hole. I didn't say a word to Ava. I know how that sounds, but I needed to know the whole shape of it before I put her in the middle of something that might not even be fixable, and I needed proof, not a feeling, before I said anything to Tyler. My best friend Jordan Reyes, who's run the books at my shop for going on 9 years and has known me since we were both 24 and broke, was the only person I told during those 5 weeks. He didn't try to talk me into confronting Tyler early. He just said, "Get it all first, Grant. You only get to have this conversation once." The dinner where it came out wasn't one I planned. It was Renata's birthday, first Sunday in June, at our place this time. 12 people around a table built for 8, extra chairs pulled from the garage. Diane had the full file ready by then, printed and organized, sitting in a folder in my truck, because I'd decided I wasn't going to let this drag into July. I just hadn't decided it would be that night. Tyler decided that for me. Somewhere between the salad and the birthday cake, talk turned to the shop. A reporter from the Spokesman Review had done a small piece on local trades businesses, and my name got a mention. Renata was proud, showing people her phone. Tyler laughed, not a warm laugh, and said, "Must be nice, being the local hero of bending metal for a living. Some of us actually deal with real money." The table went quiet for a second. My niece looked at her plate. Ava said, "Tyler," in that low, warning tone. He kept going. "I'm serious. No offense, Grant, but you built a business fixing railings. I move actual capital. There's a difference in scale is all I'm saying." I could have let it go. 6 months earlier I probably would have. Instead I said, "Funny you mentioned scale. I was about to bring up some numbers myself." I got up, went out to the truck, and came back with Diane's folder. I set it on the table next to the birthday cake, which felt almost cruel in the moment, but I didn't plan the timing, Tyler did, by opening his mouth first. "What's that?" Tyler said, and I watched something shift behind his eyes. Not guilt yet, just calculation. 6 transfers, I said. January 8th, February 2nd, February 24th, March 9th, March 30th, April 14th. $30,800 out of the legacy fund into a trading account under your name. You want to tell the table about scale now? Ava went white. What is he talking about, Tyler? Tyler tried the deflection first. It's not, Grant. That fund was practically a shared account. I had access for a reason. I was going to put it back before who noticed, I said. The credit union noticed. That's how I found out, not from you. I was managing risk, he said, and I remember thinking that was almost impressive. How fast he reached for a phrase that sounded professional instead of just saying the true thing. The market moved against me faster than I expected. I had a plan to recover it. You had a plan to gamble with my daughter's future and not tell her, I said. That's not risk management, Tyler. That's theft with a login. Ava was crying by then. Not loud, just steady. The kind of crying where somebody's rebuilding a person in their head in real time. "You told me you were putting extra into savings," she said to him. "You told me that in March. I remember exactly where we were standing." "I was going to fix it," Tyler said again, quieter now, the confidence completely gone out of him. "I swear to God, Ava, I was going to fix it before you ever had to know. That's the part you don't get to decide, I told him. Whether she has to know. That was never yours to decide. Renata reached for Ava's hand. My niece got up and started clearing plates nobody had asked her to clear, just to have something to do. Tyler sat there with his jaw working, looking for another angle and not finding one. I can pay it back, he said finally, to Ava, not to me. All of it. I have a plan. I've had a plan since March. I kept thinking one more good month and I wouldn't even have to tell you. You don't get to call it a plan, Ava said. A plan is something you tell people about. This was just you hoping I wouldn't ask. Nobody finished the cake that night. I'm not going to tell you it ended clean, because it didn't. And I think stories that wrap up too neatly usually aren't being honest with you. Diane helped us put together a repayment plan. Tyler signed a promissory note, 22,000 of the 31 back within 18 months, drawing straight from his paycheck. The rest forgiven because pursuing him further would have cost more in legal fees than we'd recover, and because, whatever else was true, Ava asked us not to make it worse than it already was. We didn't press charges. Ava's the one who gets to decide that, not me, and she decided mercy, at least for now, was worth more to her than punishment. Ava and Tyler didn't split up that week, or that month. Last I heard they're living separately while they figure out whether there's anything left worth rebuilding, and I don't know how that ends. I'm not going to pretend I do. Some welds, once they've cracked under pressure, you can grind them out and redo them properly, stronger than before. Some you can't, no matter how good your technique is, because the metal itself got compromised somewhere you can't see from the outside. What I know is that the legacy fund still exists, smaller than it was, but real, and Ava's the only name on it now. What I know is that Renata and I are okay, that Jordan still shows up every morning at 6:30 and pours the first coffee before I even get my boots laced, and that I still like the sound of a good weld setting clean the first time. I was in the shop alone a few nights ago, later than I should have been, grinding down a seam on a railing that hadn't fused quite right the first pass. You learn to feel it before you can even see it. A weak spot has a different sound under the grinder. Higher, thinner. I stood there a long time thinking about how much of what happened with Tyler I could have caught earlier if I'd just paid closer attention to the sound things were making, instead of how smooth they looked on the surface. I don't have a tidy ending for you tonight. I've got a daughter who's still figuring out what she wants her life to look like. A shop that's still standing, and a lesson about the difference between what holds and what only looks like it does. So I'll leave you with the question instead of an answer, in plain English, since that's what you came for. If it had been your legacy sitting on somebody else's table, what would you have done?